Welcome back to When I'm Not Podcasting. Dan Le Batard, or if you used to listen to him on, like I used to, on 790 to the Ticket, it would be with the, what was that guy from Westwood One? Dan Le Batard. Well, Dan Le Batard's show with Stugatz, I've listened to, going by, what is it, was 2006 they started? Something like that? Yeah. I remember hearing the first show, and it wasn't that good, but they definitely found their way. And I must say, they are the sports version of Howard Stern. They have not been afraid. Like, honestly, I think that Dan Le Batard, for the credit, even though that guy got shit on by the likes of Neil Rogers and others. Neil Rogers was a legendary radio DJ here in Miami for, going on, what 30 years before he passed away in 2008, I want to say. And it's unfortunate. And the one thing was with Dan Le Batard is that the guy, he just didn't want to do a sports radio show. He's just so beyond that. And people need to understand the fact that this guy was dropped out of ESPN like he was ridiculous. Want to talk about a real radio, really a kind of a throwback to radio. And the thing why Dan Le Batard, I think, really works so well, I was actually thinking about that. I was at a friend of mine actually talking about that, where back in the day when I listened to Dan Le Batard, he grew up he must have grown up listening to a lot of different radio shows that would have definitely fit the role of what he was doing with his show. Okay. Dan Le Batard, before he came in, he was a long-time writer for sports for the Miami Herald. Okay. And the story comes in from the Ringer I'm going to talk about is Dan Le Batard is going to be leaving ESPN. The news was so inevitable that if Le Batard saw it on a radio rundown, his own contrarianism would make him pick a less obvious topic. But his move is still revealing. Jemele Hill made her own similar leap to TV. She dubbed herself a former journalist. And former journalists were print stars. A decade ago, in a twist of fate, they were handed the keys to ESPN. Former journalists had the run of the network. It was their playpen, their ATM machine. Not every former journalist has left ESPN for Substack yet, but Le Batard's exit makes it clear their golden age is over. All right, so there's a different story about that. I get that part. But here's the thing with Dan Le Batard, is that it was for radio. He definitely gave a different feel to the show. Okay? That's all there is to it. Let me give you the original story of what actually happened. So we're going to take from New York Post. He will be leaving the company after final day of shows, which actually happened on January 4th. And it was reported that a breakup was likely coming, and that ESPN executive VP and the executive director, Norby Williamson, said in a statement that the network and Le Batard had mutually agreed to move on. And in a statement, Le Batard says, gracias to ESPN for unleashing Papi and Stugatz upon us unsuspecting America, and for lending a substantive credibility to our careening clown car. I can't believe Stugatz finally achieved his dream of being a high-priced free agent. That's pretty funny. Highly questionable will remain on ESPN after Le Batard's departure. They moved the show to an earlier time of the day and cut his national radio program by an hour. What really gave a whole lot of issues to the breakup was when there were a number of ESPN types that were getting laid off. 300 people. One of them was Chris Cody, who, if I'm correct, he is the son of Greg Cody. He was also a writer at the Miami Herald, or if he still is. And it was called he called it the greatest disrespect of his professional career. He then took on Cody's salary as a personal assistant and gave him a raise. Quote, to our loyal army of concerned fans and to everyone who walked along and played an instrument in our marching band of nowhere, know that it is a very exciting time for us, not a sad one. And that you'll be hearing our laughter again soon enough. Now, does that mean that he gets to stay on 790 the Ticket? Is he going to stay on there? Because I don't know if they have kept him on or not. I haven't read the whole story about that. But according to the schedule, he's not on there. And as far as I know, 560 or 560 to the Joe, WQAM, his show's not on there either. So he's not on a station right now. And if anybody was going to bring him on board, there'll be a lot of money to bring him on board if they did. Well, actually, he is on 560 right now. So he's 10 to noon. I don't know if that's going to be a consistent going forward, but he's now on 560. So that was the plan. I forgot that they made all that change over there. But again, it was whatever 790s lineup more or less got moved over. But again, if it's an ESPN relationship, I don't know what stays on that or not. I haven't really checked on what's going on right there. In the meantime, Dan Le Batard, with him, he comes from the line of hosts that were on AM radio that did a lot of just, really just talking about everything. Not a man talk type of format, which is what a Howard Stern or a Tom Likas did. Not so much that. But it was just real watercolor. But they did like to talk sports because it was a man thing to do. And so they would talk about that, and they would definitely talk about Miami sports. Even on a national platform, they would talk Miami sports. So they talk about the Heat and the Dolphins because they were just kind of easy to poke on and pick on. So we had shows here like Ron and Ron and Neil Rogers and Rick and Suds and Phil Hendry and Randy Rhodes. And some of these people actually got on to national careers, okay? We had some funny people down here. We had some entertaining people down here. And Le Batard just had the Miami feel to it. Definitely went with the Cuban thing because he is Cuban. And definitely him and Stugotz, they just had a good rapport together. And they always just had certain people in their studio, whether it's the producers and all, that would come in and they have their own little parts of it. The things they would just do, it was just goofy. But they had definitely had their fun. And I always wonder when they did go national and when the ESPN got this spot. But again, it was going to be under Dan Le Batard's rules. Because he wanted to keep the show fun. He wanted to keep it interesting. And he did. Did Highly Questionable. Was a fun show. I didn't watch it a whole lot. But I watched enough to know what it was all about. And I kind of got away from his show later on because I just kind of got away from it. But again, the one thing about him was that he does have that spirit of radio where he's, unabashed, and he was a bit fearless when he was on there. I look at a story going back to 2016 where WXY actually, they were going to talk about firing him over censoring an interview about a mangled penis. So here's a story about this. So during the local hour when it was not on ESPN, Dan interviewed Miami Herald journalist David Ovalle, who wrote a story about how a local woman was going to jail for 40 months after illegally performing surgery on a man's penis and mangling it. Boy, that's just a story. That's a Miami story for you right there. Le Batard became incensed when unnamed management at 790 The Ticket threatened to pull his show off the air if they kept talking about the story and not about the Cubs. And this was also because it was the morning after the Game 7 of the World Series. So here's what's going on right now. Le Batard got upset, and this is what he said. This is transcribed from this episode when he really got upset. He said, quote, "This right now might go to the morning show or might go to music and stuff, but we got someone locally already doing what Mike was fearing nationally, which is threatening the Yankees off the air if we play it. And what I'm telling you is I value more around here. I love you guys. Love you guys that we're in the morning now because of you guys. Nothing matters to me more than you don't control what comes out of my mouth. And we've got someone crazy locally right now saying they're going to yank us off the air if we continue to talk about this. And what I'm telling you right now is fire me. Not only never do that again, but fire me now if you want to control me that way. I don't want to get up at 9 o'clock in the morning, man. I'm doing this for Miami, and I'm doing this for $7.90 The Ticket. $7.90 The Ticket. I always say it so fast. Yank me off the air. Fire me now. Cancel my contract now. You can have your money and you can have your 9 o'clock hour, and I can get my sleep because this is infuriating. This isn't even happening nationally. This is happening locally. You do not control what comes out of my mouth. You're threatening to take me off the air because I'm talking about a story that was in the Miami Herald. Man, get the hell out of here. There you go. And then he said, this is what my parents fled. You will not control this. No, you will not. Money doesn't matter to me, man. I love you guys. I don't want to be up at this hour. And now you're going to control what I say at this hour when I'm doing it for you. I'm doing it from 9 to 10 for you, man, so that you can have our show. I did this show for free locally because of how much Miami matters to me. You have to be bleeping kidding, man. Oh, his producer was Mike Ryan. And then, by the way, Mike Ryan mentioned that the show got the green light from ESPN to air the interview on national radio. And the only other time he had ever been angry with management was when a former president of ESPN attempted to meddle with the show while he was on the air, back when Le Batard hosted a show on Sunday mornings, and told him he could work somewhere else if he was dismayed about it. Well, he didn't get let go. But that moment was indicative of how important a player Dan Le Batard was to radio. He was one of the last radio guys that really made compelling radio. Where are we going with this? Again, ESPN's dropped him off. He can go back to Miami somewhere else. I hope I honestly would like to see Dan Le Batard get himself a morning show on an FM station. Like, give him a morning show. Or give him a show where he can do something like he's doing now. Like, why not? I'll tell you what, if it were me, take 104.3, the alternative station, which is WSFS, drop that alternative format because they don't know what they're doing with it. Turn that to FM, do something else, and then let Le Batard get back on FM again. I just think that. But this is a national story. Now, in this story, they're talking about in the Ringer about how there are former journalists that were all on here. But see, it's not about being a journalist, okay? But there is something they're just talking about where they had a lot of journalists that were on. ESPN was turning her creative engines over to print veterans like Tony and Mike around the horn, Michael Wilbon, Tony Kornheiser, Michael and Jamel, Dan, Bomani Jones, and also the cast around the horn. And that was one of the things that we're doing. And, they're just, what they're basically saying is they're trying to go more athlete-centric, and they're changing directions. ESPN, obviously under the direction of Disney, is making changes to their sports lineup. And so the journalists are no longer the talent du jour. They want to go a different route. Okay. But what it's worth, Dan Le Batard offered a great sense to the radio industry. Like, he really was a great contribution. He was funny. And he just entertained. And, I think when I think Howard Stern takes himself so seriously, and remember, this is also like an ensemble show where they have different characters that come on, and they're really picking on their callers. Again, if they were to take callers, again, no pleasantries. So I go know the story. And I know I used to call on that show, and I actually did get hit with the going with pleasantries and getting sued on the air. So I know how far back this show goes. I was actually part of that. I was engaged, and I enjoyed it. And talk about when the Heat were bad or when the Dolphins are bad, you wanted to hear these guys talk. And because Miami Sports Radio as well at the time was always really fun. But yeah, they just had a way to things. And also, one of the things I also liked because he was a big wrestling fan. Like, not so much a big wrestling fan as he was just like enjoying to have certain people on the air to join the Gene Oaklands of the world. It was just, oh my God, the Ric Flairs of the world. It was just really great stuff. He was just different. He wanted to just talk to intriguing people, things that would be funny that he thought would be funny. He wanted to make it funny, put a poll on the board, and whatever. It was things like that. That was what he wanted to do. So it was just kind of like a romper room, just like a little morning zoo madhouse, but in the form of like what a morning zoo really should have been. It's a throwback to what you would hear in the 80s. Okay. Like even in Miami, growing up, he would have listened probably to a Sonny Fox or a Bill Tanner in the morning. And those kind of guys that were just off the cuff, ad-libbing and just having fun. And had their sidekick, which Stugatz has become more than just a sidekick. He is impaired to the show. They definitely play off each other very well. So I really hope that Dan and Stugatz get themselves back on the air very soon. A lot of credit. And guys, you've gotten a lot of shit for all the time you've been on the air, especially by Miami folks. I respect what they did on Radio Miami. And I hope, being out of the national spotlight, maybe they'll just get somewhere else. I want them to get back to what they were doing before. And I hope they do really soon. And with that, I'll talk to you next time.